and I've just finished my 18th book, and it's called Cleaning Up the Mental Mess. And it's so appropriate in this era, because we really have made such a mental mess, yet we're so powerful and we can actually clean that up. And I think part of, a big factor that I think is very important in us doing what you and I are both saying is accepting things like depression and anxiety and the negative emotions, not as being these scary things that you've got to avoid, but actually to embrace them and process them and reconceptualize them, because it's not a mental illness that you have if you're feeling depressed. You're just being a human and you're just responding to the circumstances of life, and you have a story. But we've had a message for 30 years that has really contributed to what you're not talking about. It's contributed to people, the education system, and people just kind of almost have become shallow and frustrated. And it's not who we are, because people sense that this is not right. People are frustrated. Right. People are reacting in a good way. But when you think deeply, you change the way that you actually process information. So let me make this simple. For example, if you start becoming aware of your depression, I've got a little tree here. I always use these analogies. Thoughts are real things. Our mind is real, but it's not your brain. Your mind is not your brain. So when you like, people are listening to us now, and they're going to go from here into whatever happens today in their life, they are processing in response to the events and circumstances of life. So that you're using your mind to do that. And as you're using your mind, and you talk about this as well, but as you're using your mind to respond, your brain is changing all the time anyway. That's neuroplasticity. So your brain is changing because your mind is responding. So your mind is actually the thing that makes the brain work. So your mind uses your brain, but we're in a world that tells us you are your brain. There's a real cool image of a brain.
You're right. I like that. Yeah. No, you're right. Right. It's not the same thing, and everybody.
No, it's not the same thing. But we've been told for 30 years, it's about 30, 40 years now, that neuroreductionism is the answer, that you are your brain. So, if you feel sad, your brain caused it. If this happened, but meanwhile, as you're responding, if you respond in a toxic way, if you don't manage the situation, if you try and suppress the depression, if you try and if you argue, whatever, if you don't manage, self-regulate, you actually build toxic structures into the brain. So you build these things into the brain. So wow. and you can actually build healthy ones, which is what we're designed to build. So there's a healthy one. It's always good to have.
I love that. I've never seen it put that way.
Yeah, well, this is the science I've been working on for 38 years. But literally, thoughts are real, and they look like trees. And as you think and feel and choose, which is your mind, you build these trees. And the way that you're building them regardless. So if you don't manage your mind, you're going to be building them regardless. So if you just go through life, just crashing through life, using technology incorrectly, arguing, not self-regulating, worrying, pushing down the depression instead of embracing it. Right. Using the anxiety to find the message instead of being fearful, getting whatever, you are going to build toxicity instead of health. So either way, you're building something. You're never not building.
Yes.
I teach people how to direct their neuroplasticity. And what's so important about this world is that these become the root from which you operate. So if you're constantly toxic and you have used your mind to change the structure of your brain, which is what you're doing, but if this is what you're building in your brain, and these are real, they're built on your neurons in your brain, this is what you're going to say. This is what you're going to do. This is how you view life. And then you just increase it, and that's the toxic mindsets. That will affect all 5 core areas that you talk about. So but if the science
this is like I love that. What's the word? The missing link. It's like all the stuff I talk about, right? I talk about it in the form of habits, which is, kind of ties in it. It's like we're kind of all on autopilot. 97% of our lives are these habits that we developed. And like we were just talking about earlier with this broken structure we grow up in, it's not just school, but, parents, peers, media, right? We're getting these negative things, failure habits, toxicity, whatnot from this. And then by the time we become young adults, these things are like, a lot of these are ingrained in us, right? And then it's like, from that point on, you're either building negative momentum every step of the day. Like you just said, you're either doing one or the other, or you're building positive momentum.
Exactly.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
At any point, this is the beauty of it. We can direct our neuroplasticity. So this thing of being able to change is basically directed neuroplasticity. So everything that you do, you're changing your brain, and that's just to get that in your head is already so powerful, that you're changing the structure of your brain right now as you're listening. Your brain is not the same as it was before this Instagram live started. So it's literally changing as we are talking. So you may as well direct the change. And if you do go down a rabbit But we all do. We have bad days and we just react incorrectly and we just go nuts and we get mad and whatever and we get negative and we shove down that depression and that causes brain damage. But then start self-regulating. It's never too late to actually start the self-regulation process to really bring that information up. And, you know,
I love that visual so people can kind of see, like, right, you're literally like creating these negative dark tentacles in your brain.
Exactly.
Versus
the healthy. And you talk about habits. My most recent clinical trial that I just finished, I did over 2019, which finished in December. We just busy analyzing and writing up the results and for publications and so on at the moment. And you talk about the habit formation, there's very little science, funnily enough, showing how the timing of habits form. Now, when we talk about habits, we're talking about memory. And when you talk about memory, you're actually talking about thoughts. So there's a distinct difference between all of those, and there's a very clear timing. And you probably, you would be, everyone's aware of the 21 days to form a habit, but that's actually a myth. It's not correct at all. It's not
correct.
It's a myth, but it's got very stuck. What is true about 21 days is that our body and brain do go through cycles of more or less 3 weeks when you heal. Like if you have a blister, it takes more or less 3 weeks for a blister to heal. So we do work in cycles of 21. But when it comes to thoughts and memory and building habits, it takes at least 9 weeks. You're looking at least a 9-week cycle. And most people aren't aware of that, and most people give up around day 4, day 5. That's your danger zone between day 5 and day 7, or day 4 and day 7. And in my most recent research, I actually have shown the timing of this. And so basically it takes 21 days to build a long-term, to build a thought. So a thought is a tree. And if you look at a tree, it's got all these branches. So the tree's branches are the memories. So memory is not a thought, and memories are in the thoughts. So thought is the big concept, the big tree. So it could be COVID-19, or it could be your financial situation, or it could be your identity, or your nurturing. These are the big things. And then inside there, you've got all the branches, and those are the informational memories. And then the leaves that you see are the emotional memories. So thoughts are made of memories. And when we start understanding that we're building these thoughts, and these thoughts constantly get new branches added, taken away, reshaped. And if they're toxic, these things, when they're toxic, damage the brain. Our brain's only wired for this. It's not wired for this. So we learn this and we wire this in through incorrect reactions. That when we start self-regulating and managing our mind, and through the stuff that you teach as well, that's pretty much mind management principles, you basically will pull these things up. And as soon as you're aware of them, you actually change them into these. But it's a process of embracing and reconceptualizing. And I developed techniques and stuff over the last 38 years that are in my books and whatever to teach how to do that.